Morning, sir. So happy to have you here for this conversation. Actually, I'm very keen to know, how did you get interested in studying the temples? What was the trigger for you?
It was accidental in my case, because I did not plan to study architecture. Actually, most of our passions are in that way accidental, at least if you see life in one life context. That you stumble upon them and then fall in love, and then the passion develops, and that's how you study. So, I was working in this University of Journalism in Bhopal, University of Journalism. And just one occasion arose where the VC said that they are going for a conference in Khilnani, Odisha. So it was to be my first time in Odisha. He said, come along to this conference. I was not too much interested in a journalism conference. But I thought of what was new, because I was always, ever since my childhood, very good at geography, so I always knew that some great temple towns like Cuttack, Bhubaneswar and Puri are right near where we are going. So I said, yes, I'll come. And after the conference was, as most of journalistic conferences are, I was not again too interested in that. But then they said, let us go along to a few temples around, in which one was Kaplash, where Kapil Muni is said to have done penance. And then, of course, we went to have darshan in Jagannath Puri. Jagannath Puri, of course, was a wonderful, beautiful experience. But the crowds were too much, so I was not at that time able to focus on architecture and sculpture of. It's also a wonderful, beautiful temple, great sculpture, great architecture. But I was not able to pay too much attention because we were also not allowed to take any electronics in. At that time, it was not the era of smartphones. But people had some phones which could click pictures. I did not have, I had to borrow it from people who were traveling with me. But even then, these two temples and the great Lingaraj temple of Bhubaneswar also, we were not allowed to take any electronics in. So it was not possible. Although I was awed by the architecture sculpture, and I tried to remember in my mind that what were the bars, how it was, how beautiful it was, what were the hast, bhang and mudras of the deities that I saw. But I could not record them. But then, after that, they proposed to go to Konark. And Konark, because it's not a functioning temple, as we know, the temple is no longer there. The Garbha has gone. It's only just the Jagmohan, the Mandapam. But the Mandapam itself, what was left, what was, you could say, 20 to 30% of what the temple used to be at its prime, even that was so exquisite that I was like crazy running around from one sculpture to another for 4 or 5 hours in the temple premises of Konark, and I would look at one sculpture to another and just could not fathom how we could do this. And that this was done hundreds of years ago. The Konark temple stage is 800, 900 years old, but around 1000 years old. So we could do this. We did far better than this, but it was destroyed. And somehow we forgot that we were so great, because I am a huge fan of V.S. Naipaul. But in one of his books I read, I guess, India, Wounded Civilization, he remarks on the lack of sense of architecture that Indians have. He said that Indians don't have a sense of architecture. Now, what does he, where does he base his comment upon? He looks at all the buildings going around, the silk architecture, I'm saying, and he sees all sorts of houses, no particular era, because the West is, at least in the what is now Western Europe and the US, they have followed trends over last few decades, at least 1 century or so, where their one architectural style comes and goes. So they have, if you go to a great city like New York, you will be able to see layers of all those trends, of in which decade what trend dominated in architecture. But here he says, he comes and visits and he sees all these buildings, and he says, I can see no trend, because right next to an Art Deco building there will be completely eclectic building which is mixing this element and that element, and some just are buildings with some body colors and all. So he based his comment on that, but I was deeply hurt by that comment, that Indians don't have a sense of architecture. So when I went to Konark, I discovered, no, we did have, even if we don't have now, we did have. So what was the process by which we created all of this, something which was so great, so wonderful, and what was the process due to which we lost all of this knowledge? So that it became a compulsive habit to travel to all of these places. Also, incidentally, I found out that at that time 21, 22 years old. 22, 23 years old. At that time, where I came from, people didn't used to travel to see things. They traveled either for marriages or deaths of relatives. Otherwise, they didn't travel. So, the idea that you could go to a faraway place, even inside India, to just look at a piece of architecture was unthinkable. But then, when I traveled by train, and then I started looking because the internet had just come up. And ICTAAS had just released its website that you could book tickets online. And when I saw those tickets online and the prices were, I thought this could be done. I can go to some places, maybe sleep on the platform station, wherever it is, but I can go to these places and actually see all of these temples. So that is when that journey started, that is when that story started. And then it still is a compulsive habit. I've been to more than 1500, 1600 sites now, all over India. Even then, I'm very happy that when I will die, there will still be 8 ancient temples in India which I have not seen. So this is a never-ending journey. I'm very happy that it's a never-ending journey. Due to that, I have traveled to almost all of India. I've been to more than 700 districts of total 770, 780 in search of all these temples and structures only. I hope that this journey continues, and it has taught me a lot because my journey with architecture started in situ. I first went to the sites. I first had examples in my mind, visual images of architecture and structure, and then later on I started studying the text. So what happened with me, the process was reverse. In most cases, it is actually the reverse. The students first encounter the books, the descriptions about these temples, and they're already familiar with a certain way of how to see a temple, how to recognize sculpture, architecture, and then they go to the temple. So the process is reversed and they're conditioned. So I read George Michel, I read Adam Hardy after that. But when I read them, I could already tell where they were wrong, very clearly wrong. That they would describe a piece of architecture like this, 26 pieces in a pillar. And they were very particular about it, which should be, I'm not denying. But then they were interested in architecture just as a building, because at the end of their description, they will say, in the dark red, there is a slight image of vision, and leave it at that. Nothing more. So that taught me that there is something deeply wrong with how people describe it, and that was because I went to the sites first. So I would like to suggest also that the process should be that you should go to these sites, and they are everywhere. We just don't know. Any major city you are in, within 1-2 hours of that city, there is a great temple site. So you don't need to go to all of them, but at least you can visit 2 or 3. At least you will have that experience, and then if you read the books, it's a much better process.
As you're saying, like you have visited many temples, so can you just elaborate like few of the temples that are favorite of yours?
That are too many, but still, if I would start, for example, I started with Konark Temple, so that image is still there. I've been there 4 times. Every time I was like a child running around because I could not take it out. Because the scale at which they built that temple and the minutiae that they observed and reflected was something which shocked me, very pleasantly shocked me, taught me a lot. But what happened is that as I started going and started seeing other temples, studying about other temples, I could see a universal theme which pervaded all of these temples. So, yesterday also I went to Khajuraho once again. Khajuraho I've been 4 times. And still every time, it's a daze. Every time you discover something new. Every time there is something more to study, something more to know. So of course, Khilnani Mahadev I would consider to be one of the greatest achievements of Hindu temple architecture. Of course, we have lost 90% of what existed in North India at least. Even in South India, the destruction is great in North India because the center of our civilization, like UP and Bihar, very few examples are left. Near in Kanpur, Bihar, there are some big temples like Khajuraho big temple, Nivedhera big temple, Tindoli, and some big temples are left. They were also, buried in the flood of Ganga, Yamuna. Otherwise, Uttar Pradesh has lost almost everything. There are a few in Mahoba, but Mahoba is just across the border from Madhya Pradesh, so it's more a part of culturally a part of Madhya Pradesh. But if you leave this Jhansi, Lalitpur, Mahoba part, Uttar Pradesh and Bihar has lost most of it. But what has survived? Khilnani Mahadev is, I would consider to be the best example that survives. And what the saddest part is that there are no longer temple, sculptural and architectural guilds about central Indian architecture which could still create a great temple like this. Otherwise, the Ram temple Ayodhya should have been built, its style should have been closer to Kandariya Mahadev. Otherwise, right now the style in which it is built is closer to the Gujarat style of architecture. Nagar itself, so it's Nagar, that same variety. But the Mandapam style is more like the Samvaran style of Gujarat, which is more popular there. So it's very sad that the architect guilds here did not survive. So this is the greatest example. Konark I told you. Then of course Kailashnath Ellora is one of the greatest wonders. People say it's cliche to take its name, but it is one of the greatest wonders. True story, more than 150,000 individual sculptures carved out from a single stone, where they were able to maintain the expertise to a level where it was not desecrated while they were carving it, is something very completely exceptional. Then there is a great temple in Rajasthan, Jagat, Ambika Mata temple. This temple fortunately survived destruction because it's hidden behind a hill. So, and it's one of the rare examples where a Hindu temple, ancient Hindu temple, was built completely in marble. Because otherwise, if you go to ancient Hindu temples, they are either in sandstone, granites, or stone. But very rarely in marble. But it's an example completely built in marble, completely intact. So every single murti, every single vigraha is intact. So it's absolutely wonderful. It's still hidden, very difficult to go to. People don't know much about it. But that's one of the greatest sites. And in the south, there are many, once again I will be doing injustice to a lot, but in Belawadi, in Karnataka, there is the Hoysal temple, which is three temples conjoined, connected with same mandap. But this temple has three mandapas, one closed mandap, two open mandap. And the largest, the outermost mandap is the largest mandapa of all Hoysal temples with, I guess, 108 pillars, if I am not wrong, the 10 pillars. So the beauty of that temple and the ambience of that temple is one of the greatest.
What according to you is darshan?
Yeah, so moving on to the darshan part. See, when I started studying temple, the first thing which impressed me was, of course, architecture. Because when you are a kid, or when you are growing up, when you are very young, the monumentality of things is what impresses me. So monumental architecture is what impressed me. And I am very happy about that part of architecture because there is an intent to impress by the scale. And it is because if that had not been, today in Instagram generation, this would not have flared up because one of the good fallouts of Instagram is that kids armed with their mobile phones and iPhones started going to all of these places, started clicking absolutely wonderful pictures of sculpture and architecture. They started sharing them with their friends, which told our next generation, the youngest generation, that oh, we were so great that we could create, all of this. So that part is great. But after the monumentality, I encountered architecture. I was very much impressed by it. First of all, I studied my primary area of interest was architecture. But then I understood you cannot understand it without understanding sculpture. Because if you go to Karnataka, Dravid tradition in Karnataka, some parts, it's not even clear. You cannot say either they are sculpture or architecture. Technically, they should be called sculpture because they are carved. But they perform the role of an architectural piece. So somewhere it merges so closely with each other that you cannot understand one discipline without understanding another discipline, the sculpture also. So when I started studying sculpture, I had to move on to iconography because you cannot understand sculpture without iconography. Most of our deities, by face, you will not be able to make that which deity it is. You have to see what headdress, what ayudh, what bhang, what mudra, what asan, what vahan. All of these you have to identify in order to identify which deity it is. So you have to study iconography. And when you study iconography, you also have to go to spillover, this Indic Shastras, then it is dance and drama. It's also the nature of Hindu disciplines, how each and every single of them are connected. But that also tells you that the primary purpose, all of these are important. All of these are very extremely important part of a temple ecosystem. But the most important part is to have darshan in a temple. The spiritual part is the most important. That is the primary purpose of going to a temple. And that's why darshan is most important. Now what's darshan as you ask me? Darshan is the wonderful thing about Hindu disciplines is the same vocabulary permeates all of those disciplines. For example, Hindu philosophy is not called, philosophy is not an exact translation of the word darshan. It is called Hindu darshana. Darshana is that which you see, not what you imagine or love of knowledge. Philosophy is love of knowledge. This is not love of knowledge direct, but that which you see. So what you directly witness. So that is our word for philosophy. But when you go to a temple, the same process is supposed to take place. Now what is the architectural adhar of this? The architectural adhar is everyone is aware of that kalash over the temple, which everyone sees. Now that kalash is not completely, it is hollow. And inside it, there is Naivedyam or Navadra, which is put inside it. Now, that's not the only kalash that is there in the temple. There is another kalash underground, directly underneath the deity, in the line of the kalash above. That again has the beej, Naivedyam or the Navadra. That is considered to be the seat of the particular kshetra of the particular deity, and the kalash that is above, that is considered to be the seat of supreme consciousness. And when an archaka, when a pujari, when a priest invokes the deity with all the proper rituals, what is supposed to have taken place is Shakti descends from above, from that kalash of the supreme consciousness, and the individual Shakti of the kshetra rises from below, underneath the vigraha, and in vigraha they are supposed to unite with that process is called in Dhyana and Diksha's meditation as ascent and descent of consciousness. And when that happens, when you witness that process, that is actually coming down of Shakti, rising of Shakti, in the case of chakras also, the Shakti has to rise from Mooladhara, Shakti comes down from Sahasrara, takes hold of the individual Shakti, pulls it to the level of Sahasrara. So the same process is actually supposed to take place in a temple also during the act of darshan. When you witness that, you are witnessing your own rise of, you are supposed to witness your own rise of Shakti from Mooladhara to Sahasrara. It depends on how pure is your consciousness, it depends on how pure is your chitta, how much you have weeded out through meditation, through contemplation, through good behavior, the pet parts of your thought, how you have made your chitta ekagra, because the very purpose of yoga is also yoga chitta vritti nirodha. So through meditation, you control the tendencies of the mind. The more you have done that, the better darshan you will have in a temple. But the purpose of the temple is that. So Rajesh Mishra, not the Osho one, there is another Rajesh Mishra, the disciple of the great Kapila who instituted ICTAAS, Indian Knowledge System in India. And he says the nature of Hindu disciplines is that every Hindu discipline takes you from bheda to abhed, from differentiation to non-differentiation. So the same process is supposed to happen in a temple. That is the act of darshan. When you stand in mandapa at the border of Antara, when you witness this process of invoking of the deity in the garbhagriha, that is a process that is supposed to take place. The purer your consciousness is, the higher your consciousness is, the more you will be able to partake in that. That's why it is recommended that a devotee also has a charya, not just the archaka. That when before going to temple, it is recommended in certain places. If you are going to a great temple, keep vrata. So do not eat food which is not conducive to that. Keep vrata, keep your behavior, keep chanting the mantra, so that you eliminate all other thoughts from your mind and only the deity remains in your mind, only darshan remains in your mind. And when you go in front of that, the better you are at partaking that ascent and descent of consciousness. That in essence is the act of darshan. That is what darshana is. And there are many other aspects of the temple, but this remains the primary purpose of going to a temple.
There are many interesting elements we have been discussing about temples since yesterday. What is the most fascinating aspect of the Hindu temple according to you?
So, for me it is to take the most concrete of materials, which is a stone, and to convey the most abstract of philosophy that exists in all human cultures and civilizations, which is Vedanta and Advaita Vedanta. To be able to convey that philosophy from a stone remains to me actually the most fascinating aspect of temple. That how did they take a material which was so deeply concrete and yet transfer it into something so plastic, so mobile in meaning, that it could convey the greatest of darshana, that exists all over in all human cultures and civilizations. There are many other fascinating aspects, but this ability of our architecture, all architectural styles do convey certain senses. They interact with you, they talk to you, they have a greater meaning than what you would believe at first look. But the purpose of Hindu temple architecture is nothing less than suggesting the means of moksha to you. That to me remains the best, the most pleasant and most important aspect of temple architecture.
So since we are in Khajuraho, can you talk about the use of erotica in Khajuraho?
Yeah, a lot of people talk about it. So first of all, it's very unfortunate also that I lead temple tours also to great temple Kshetras in the programs called Evolutionary. I lead temple tours to all of these places. We recently went to Chhattisgarh. Chhattisgarh, where there is a temple called Buramdev, and that is called the Khajuraho of Chhattisgarh. So there are some erotic murtis there. So wherever there is erotica, near that there is a temple Madhva Mahal, and as soon as people saw, Madhva Mahal has lots of it, most of the sculpture, like 60% is erotic. So when they saw, and the first reaction was, oh, this is like Khajuraho. So Khajuraho is famous only for that. If you, God forbid, if you hire a guide here, and if you take them to the temples, they will only show you that, which is, I guess, there are many calculations, but the erotic sculpture is not more than 10 to 12% of it. So what does it mean? I tried to explain that in many of my writings also. That just yesterday, I think it was stressed again and again that the temple is an imprint of the cosmos. It actually reflects the entire cosmos. So in that, in cosmos, there will be war, there will be food, there will be sex, there will be all of this. So in that, they do describe all of that. But that is not the purpose of going to a temple. And of course, the artistic imagination there in those times was more uninhibited than it is now. Now people just do such kind of art with some political messaging. But there, that was not the purpose. It was to reflect whatever happens in Sansara. For example, if you go to Lakshman temple, in Adhishtan, most of the erotica is there. The most number of erotica is on Adhishtan, the walls of Adhishtan. If you go to the temple, Antaral is where you will find most of the erotic union, conjugal couples. In all of the temples, Lakshman, Vishwanath and others also. That's simply to convey the meeting of two bodies, which is Mandap and Garudha. So the union is shown. So it's a very direct purpose. Otherwise, that is not the purpose of it. The purpose is to simply to reflect whole of events. Like some say they were encouraging people, that was not the point of creating a temple and creating all of this culture. Some say it was degeneration. Those who say that I've been to more than 1600, I've been to at least 600 sites which are temple sites which are erotica. So Khajuraho is far from, it simply was the first one to become famous for that. Actually, it's all over. Anyone who has seen more than 10 temples, ancient temples, they will know this is everywhere. It is not exception. It is the norm. And just like they were displaying everything else, they were also displaying this, and there was no inhibition in that because the artists knew that they were creating something very divine. And in that, if they had to portray this, they did not shy away from this because the purpose was great.
You have mentioned in the Hindu temple to be a system. So why do you feel this? Please explain.
So earlier we talked about darshan, what is the primary purpose of going to a temple. But there are many other aspects to a temple which we know. The primary reason I did not like the writings of most of the Western authors because they took temple just as a building. For example, if you read Adam Hardy, one of the most accomplished of the Western authors, and he will discuss many different parts of the building, but they would make it feel as if it's just a dead building. They study temples like they study museums. Things which are good art pieces which are no longer in use. So they treat it as a dead system, not a living system. But a temple, on the other hand, is a living system. Living system in two senses. First of all, the deity is supposed to be alive. That is why when the Ram temple case went to the court, the person who was arguing the case, actually presenting the case, was Ram Lalla himself. So the deity was not just personified, the deity was considered real. That's how the case went to the court. That's how the court actually listened to the appeal. I am not aware, I am missing the legal terminology, but actually the plaintiff or whatever the word is, was Ram Lala himself. So the deity was not, even to say personification is to see your culture at one remove.
Juristic person.
Juristic person. Yeah, juristic person was Ram Lala himself. Even to say that its personification is to see your culture at one remove. Because what happens is they are not personifying. They know that it is real. They know that it is alive. And the temple, if you study the Shastras, the entire temple is considered to be the body of the deity himself. In many ways, one is supine, one is standing. The entire Kshetra is considered to be a Purusha, like we discussed so many times yesterday. So first of all, it is considered to be a living system. This is one part, where the deity is alive, where the rituals are alive. The second part is what? That it is an ecosystem which interacts with individuals and communities living in and around it. This is very important. This is another dimension which your question actually pertains to that how it is a living system. Living system that it interacts with communities and individuals living around. So what happens? Like if you go to any great temple, any ancient temple which is historic extent, do not, in this, Khajuraho is not very useful except of I guess Matangeshwar, which the temple which is still alive, where the puja is very vibrant and daily. If you go to any temple in Karnataka, for example, where ancient temple is also a very living temple, like the puja is very alive, you will observe that the deity has many needs. The deity is like a person. So, for example, he will change clothes 5 times a day. He will have bow 3 times a day. There will be various pujas offered to him. Various devotees will come. Somebody will come for a horoscope, for a jatak telling. Somebody will come to for a prayer. They will write something on a letter and offer it to the deity. So the deity has many jobs. Deity is like a king who is holding a court. He is very alive, and so there are many needs of the deity. Now, who will fulfill these needs of the deity? There will be individuals and communities. Somebody will grow the food that goes on to create the prasadam of the deity. Somebody will cook that prasadam. Somebody will grow the flowers that are necessary to actually, offer to the deity. Somebody will give the milk and honey and all the dairy products that goes on to the abhishekam of the deity. Then, according to those needs, there are many communities which fulfill. Somebody will provide water, which is specific to the deity. Somebody will provide many other services. So the deity has many needs. It is a person, it is a living entity, and then they need many individuals and communities to serve them. Those all are servitors of the deity. They all live in and around. If you go to Chidambaram temple, like Nataraj, anyone has been to Chidambaram temple? Yeah. It's a complete universe in itself. The Dikshita community, of course, lives there, but there are many temples like this. If you go to Srirangam, Tiruchirappalli, many of you have been there, it is said that that city, that temple is not within the city is within the temple. Because the temple is so big, there are 7 gopurams, 7 concentric actually squares. And inside those squares, many communities there. I was so shocked for the first time. I entered the first gopuram, first gate, and there was a bus inside the temple. Technically, I was inside the temple, there was a bus inside the temple. There are roads, there are shops, there are banks within the temple. So, there are various needs of the deity. Deity needs communities and individuals, those people have needs. So, all of that creates an ecosystem. If you go to all of those places, the entire town, actually the entire town of Chidambaram exists just to serve that temple. If you remove that temple, the town is gone. Khajuraho will stop being a town also. It was a village only. If you remove the temple, everything else is gone. So, first of all, the deity needs a lot of things, then the individuals need a lot of things, then the bhakt, those who come, because Hindu Dharma has this cosmology of yatras, sacred yatras, tirth-yatras. And tirth-yatra means that everyone from every part of India has to go to other parts of India to have darshan of that tirth. Now that creates another ecosystem. For example, Ram Mandir has created such an economy. Ayodhya is going to be boosted many times. I'm not aware of the number, but 4,000, 5,000 crores or something which revenue is producing. So an entire temple, I am very fond of saying, temple is that institution which creates all other institutions. So if you want to create all institutions that are necessary in a Hindu society, you create a temple. Temple will generate all other institutions around it. So this is how it is living. Some communities provide one thing to it, some communities provide other things to it, some individuals provide security, some individuals provide food. And then what happens is that charity happens through that. Because in ancient times, charity happened through the sacred institutions. The king, the Vaishyas, and all other, they donated to the temple. And temple would redistribute the wealth amongst those who are needy. There are many ways to do it. For example, the temple runs Anakshetra all the time, a great temple. There is always what we not call Bhandara going on. Whoever is hungry, they can go there, they can have food. If you have something to donate, you do. If you don't have anything, that's okay. You serve just by being there, but just by serving others. So that is one feature of the temple. Then they run many hospitals, not just the Ayurvedic one, but modern ones also. Then there is the education aspect of it. If you go to Chidambaram once again, you will see many students studying there, inside the temple. If you go to Shrangeri, you will see many students studying there. Now that is the Vedic and the core Shastriya subjects that are happening. If you go to Goa, people are not aware that Goa is a great place for Kshetras. The Ponda Taluka of Goa actually has great many temples. If you go to those temples, all around the temple there will be schools and universities, colleges, which are run by temple on great subsidy, where fees is like 100 rupees or 50 rupees or something, just token fee. So that people who cannot send their children to a private school for better education, they can send them to this school with the government fee, sort of 50-100 rupees, and they can get good education. So they run schools, they run hospitals, they run old age homes, they run Anakshetram. So all of this creates an ecosystem. Then what happens is that people donate to temple in kind and cash. So earlier what happened is that a lot of kings donated land to the temples. So the temple kept acquiring lands. Now what would happen? The temple cannot take all the lands. So what would they do? They would redistribute that land and once again to people who do not have lands. Who are landless. Now there is a great problem of landless laborers. The access labor from rural areas, which, when there is no job, they go off to other places to do agriculture on some other streets, and so they get very paltry sums. But here, the temple would give the land to a certain family. The family had the right to till it, use its produce, and in return, they would provide one service to the temple. So there is a relation, there is an ecosystem which connects the communities and the temple. What happened is that when we do not understand our customs, our traditions, our rituals, India had Tenant Act. It came in many successive waves in many different states of India. Now nobody thought of destroying this temple ecosystem. Nobody did it knowingly. But Tenant Act declared, according to more than 10, 15, 20 years, I do not know the particulars, if somebody does not have the deed and if they can prove their presence on the certain land and nobody else has the land deed, they can have the land deed on that. What happened with this? Because the earlier system, of course, it did not deal in, not all the temples dealt in these written records. So what happened is that overnight temple lands which were right in the middle of a great city like Chennai, the lands which were of no commercial value, overnight became crores and crores. And so those people sold all of that land and that beautiful ecosystem was destroyed. So the Tenant Act was necessary. We needed that. But had we known our culture more deeply, we would have had certain clauses where we would have excluded the temple lands from this land. That law was necessary. Nobody was trying to destroy the temple ecosystem. In this, no malice is involved. But they simply did not know their culture and a lot of that was destroyed. In this way, it's a living system. The way we are taught temples, the way we are taught about temples is that it is a dead building that we have to study. Like if it's a museum piece, that's not true. That's not it. And if you treat it like that, it will become dead over time. Like this case that I quoted just now, many ways if you treat it as a dead building, if you keep teaching your students as a dead building, it will become a dead place. So, but that's not how we can teach, how we can treat temples. There is a different way. It is a living entity in many ways of the word, in many meanings of the word, including that the deity is living, that a kshetra is living, that there is a purush, that there is an element or siddhant which is living, and it interacts with communities in an ecosystem. An ecosystem is always alive. Even when it is concerned with just plants and trees and inanimate matter, that inanimate matter also, chemicals also communicate with the biological matter and there is a change. Ecosystem is that it's much more alive. So if you treat an ecosystem as something dead, it will die in future. So that's the mistake that we have to correct in our study, first of all in academia and then in other ways. I'm afraid very few authors have discussed this. One of the authors that architectural students study, one who was great I would say the only Westerner who understood us correctly was Stella Crandish, the Hindu temple, where she knows, where she gives proper place to rituals, customs, traditions, where she doesn't consider it a dead building. She was very correct about our tradition. And then one great Kannadiga scholars, only 40% of his works have been translated into English and made available to us, S.K. Ramachandra Rao. His works on all aspects of iconography, sculpture and architecture are so deep, but so wonderfully written. He's such a wonderful author. You can read Agam Encyclopedia. He has gone through all the agamas which speak on temple traditions. Created an encyclopedia of 12 volumes. Mind you, it's readable like a novel. You can lie in the bed and read that encyclopedia. It's that readable, so knowledgeable, and yet he doesn't treat temple as a dead building. He treats it as a living system. So if we teach him more, if we include more of S.K. Ramachandra Rao, and we should also be aware of the politics in all of these disciplines. Stella Crandish got it right in 1950. I think 51 or 49 she published her work. Now we are 75 years later. During these 75 years later, hundreds and thousands of research papers and architectural fields are written where they have proved that Stella Crandish got it wrong. They are trying to prove that she got it wrong. That it was actually not a living system, it was not like this. She was influenced by some Hindu sadhus, and that, she perverted and distorted her image. We should be aware of the politics of the research paper that are being published all over the world in Western universities also. That we should make our children, make our students aware. Then we will move on to the correct understanding of the time.
Sir, I would like to tell you, can you please summarize why it is important to study the Hindu temple as an institution?
Because, like I said, Hindu temple is that one institution which recreates all other social institutions in Hindu society. I will end with one institution, actually, which I never believed would be there in temple. If you go to Chamba, Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand actually preserve a lot of great temples in their original ecosystem. So Chamba has this great temple, Lakshmi Narayan temple. Chamba is a beautiful, right now it was flooded very sadly, right now it is also flooded. But Chamba is a beautiful town. It has at least 10, 12 ancient temples. The most center, the biggest is Lakshmi Narayan temple complex. In front of it, the temple complex is around 12 temples on one complex. So great many temples. The largest temple is of Lakshmi Narayan. In front of Lakshmi Narayan, there is a platform. उस पर लिखा हुआ है न्याय चबूतरा. So I was very surprised that why is न्याय चबूतरा क्यों लिखा है? So when I asked them, they said, "Sir, we do not go to the court of law for all the petty disputes that we have. If a husband and wife have a fight, two brothers have a fight, for non-violent crimes, for all our small crimes, if two neighbors have fought, they come to the temple, take Bhagwan as Sakshi, and solve all our problems here." So it also becomes a paralegal institution which solves most of the cases, petty cases of society. So in that is one institution which is capable of generating all other socio-political, spiritual institutions that are needed in a society. For that alone, we need to study our temple ecosystem, our temple as a living system, and for that it is extremely important that we convey and transfer this to the next generation. I will request that our students in next generation does study it. It's a very glamorous field also, because there is so much that is exquisite, aesthetic, beautiful to see, to witness. Exotic sites, I say, most of the kids today, they want to travel, I say we should encourage them to travel. But their bucket list should be curated according to the Tirthyatras, and we were the first people on earth to create bucket lists in India. 12 Jyotirling, अरे 12 जाने हैं, 4 ही गए हैं, 8 बचे हैं, 4 धाम में 1 ही जा पाए, 3 बचे हैं. That's an automatic bucket list in your mind. 52 शक्ति पिटारे तो 5 ही हुए हैं हमारे, 47 अभी जाने को बाकी हैं. ये bucket list है. So उसको मैं encourage करना चाहिए, and it is so glamorous a field. The architecture, sculpture is so interesting, and the beautiful sandstone, granite, all of these structures make for great. I will not encourage that too much selfie culture, but at least they make for great backgrounds as photos. We should mold that behavior. See, one thing is to fret and fume and abuse our young generation. मत करो ये, निकल जाओ यहाँ से. Another is to say, you still take photos. They are good photos. These are good structures. Somebody would have created, would not have wanted just them to people to go and observe nothing else. They would have wanted you to observe. And when there is some way to record, they would have wanted you to record. So you do click pictures, but you do be respectful. You do maintain the rules of that property, that place, that kshetra, but encourage them to go to these temples. It is a very glamorous field. And by encouraging this, actually we will be recreating a lot in our society which was lost and which should be there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.